Have you ever been told to chase a job, to search for a position, to compete with the world just to make ends meet? God says something different. He says, don't look for a job, not because He doesn't care about your needs, but because He wants to show you a higher path, a path where your provision doesn't come from human effort, but from divine direction. Today, I want you to understand that your life is not meant to depend on employment, on people, or on circumstances. God's provision comes in ways you cannot plan, in ways you cannot predict, but it always comes at the perfect time. If you can learn to trust Him, to align with His purpose, and to stop chasing the world's system, you will see doors open that no human could ever unlock. When God speaks, His words are not just advice. They are commands that carry life-changing power. Today, God is saying to you, don't look for a job. And the first reaction many will have is disbelief. How can one survive without a job? How will bills be paid, mouths fed, and responsibilities handled? That is the very question that limits faith. God is not calling you to laziness. He is calling you to trust in His supernatural provision. Trust is not simply a mental exercise. It is an act of obedience. When you rely solely on human effort, you limit yourself to what humans can do. Human effort, no matter how intelligent, skilled, or talented, is limited by time, circumstance, and resources. But God's provision has no limit. When you put your trust in Him, you step into a realm where miracles become natural. Consider the story of the widow who had only a small jar of oil. On the surface, it seemed insufficient for her needs. She had no way to pay her debts, no means to survive, yet she obeyed God's instruction to pour oil into empty vessels. That small act of faith, that willingness to follow God's instruction over common sense, resulted in abundance beyond measure. She experienced a supply that no human job could ever provide. This is the first principle. When God tells you not to look for a job, He is calling you to stop depending on your own hands, your own intelligence, and your own plans, and to start depending fully on Him. Many people fail to see the miraculous because they insist on following the natural order. They wake up every day, put on a suit, and go to a place where money is exchanged for labor. And while there is nothing inherently wrong with work, God is calling you to a different kind of life, one where He becomes your source. Faith is the currency of the supernatural. If you truly believe that God is your provider, then you must be willing to relinquish your own efforts and trust that He will meet your every need. That does not mean you will sit idle, nor does it mean you will be passive. Faith requires action, but the action is guided by God, not by fear or desperation. When God says, don't look for a job, He is not saying, do nothing. He is saying, stop leaning on human ways, start seeking my ways. And God's ways often require patience. Patience is not waiting in fear. It is waiting in faith. It is the confident expectation that what God has promised will come to pass at the right time. The people who thrive under God's provision are those who refuse to panic, who refuse to succumb to anxiety, and who refuse to take matters into their own hands. Many believers fail because they think God's timing is too slow, so they jump into the natural system, seeking jobs, pursuing promotions, and following conventional paths. But God's timing is perfect. When you stop chasing after jobs and start pursuing God, doors will open that no human can open. Opportunities will appear where none existed. Connections will arise from places you never expected. The key is to maintain unwavering faith. Faith is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it becomes. Each time you obey God instead of relying on human solutions, your faith grows. You begin to see that God is not limited by your bank account, your resume, or your circumstances. Provision comes in many forms. Sometimes it is money, sometimes it is resources, sometimes it is divine favor that opens doors to opportunities you never imagined. But all provision requires trust. You cannot receive God's supernatural supply while your mind is fixed on the natural human solutions. You must set your heart fully on Him, believing that He is faithful to meet your every need. Many people fail to experience the supernatural because they are looking at their needs through the lens of lack. They see bills, debts, and responsibilities and panic. God is calling you to change your perspective. Look not at what is visible, but at what is invisible. Look at God's promises, not your problems. Abraham was called to leave his home, to go to a land he did not know, and to wait for a son that had not yet been born. He had no job, no income, no guarantees, but he believed God, and God provided. Every step he took in obedience unlocked new levels of provision. When God tells you, don't look for a job, He is calling you to live like Abraham, fully dependent on Him, fully believing in His promises, and fully willing to act on His instructions, even when the natural seems impossible. You may wonder, but what about my responsibilities, my family, my future? God is aware of all these needs. That is why He gives the instruction, stop relying on human means and start trusting Him. Your obedience activates His power. You must take your hands off the natural and place your heart fully in the spiritual. The more you depend on God, the more you discover that His provision is not limited to what you can earn or achieve. It flows supernaturally. And here is the most important truth. God's provision is not just for survival, it is for abundance. He does not call you to simply make ends meet. He calls you to live in a level of provision that exceeds expectation. This requires faith, persistence, and complete surrender. It is a daily decision to trust God over your own understanding. It is a lifestyle that refuses to be intimidated by the world, by fear, or by the pressures of conventional society. When you choose to trust God instead of chasing a job, you enter a spiritual economy where blessings come in unexpected ways. You may find resources appearing just when you need them, doors opening without effort, and people arriving to assist you who you did not even know existed. But all of this is contingent upon faith. God does not force provision into your hands. It comes to those who obey, who believe, and who remain patient. The journey may be uncomfortable at first. You may face skepticism from friends, family, or colleagues who do not understand why you are refusing to pursue a job. They will question your logi, your intelligence, and your common sense. But their doubts cannot override God's command. Remember, faith often requires walking alone, trusting what you cannot see, and believing what others consider impossible. The natural mind will always question, doubt, and plan. The spiritual mind trusts, obeys, and expects. Your obedience in this matter is the first step into a life of supernatural provision. You will learn that God's supply is far more abundant, more creative, and more consistent than anything you could earn through human effort. Every step you take in faith strengthens your position in God's economy. Every act of trust expands your capacity to receive from Him. This is how miracles are born, not by human striving, but by divine reliance. So when God says, don't look for a job, remember that it is not a denial of your needs, but a call to extraordinary faith. It is an invitation to experience the supernatural, to live beyond limits, and to trust a God who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that you ask or think. Obey Him fully, depend on Him completely, walk in faith, and provision will follow in ways that surpass imagination. Your obedience will not only provide for you, it will also inspire those around you to believe in the power of God's provision. This is the life of a believer who trusts in the Almighty, who does not chase human means, and who allows God to become the source of all that is needed. Faith opens doors, unlocks resources, and changes destinies. It is the most powerful tool a believer can wield. And God's command to stop looking for a job is a direct invitation to step into this extraordinary life. God has a plan for your life, a calling that is uniquely yours. And when he speaks to you and says, don't look for a job, he is redirecting your focus from the temporary to the eternal, from the natural to the supernatural, from human solutions to divine purpose. Many people make the mistake of thinking that a job is the solution to every problem. They believe that if they secure employment, all their struggles will vanish, bills will be paid, mouths will be fed, and life will run smoothly. But a job can never satisfy your God-given purpose. A job can provide money, but it cannot fulfill destiny. A job can give security, but it cannot bring significance. God is calling you to a higher path, a path that requires you to step out of the natural and embrace your calling fully. The first step in pursuing your calling is understanding that your life is not meant to fit into someone else's plan. Many people are trapped in employment because they are seeking validation, approval, or security from the world. They wake up every day and go to places where their talents are underutilized and their dreams are stifled. But God is saying, stop conforming to the world. Stop chasing what others expect of you. Follow me, and I will show you the path designed for you. Pursuing your calling requires courage. It requires a willingness to walk away from comfort, stability, and the familiar. It is not a path for the faint-hearted. Many will look at you and question your sanity when you refuse to pursue a conventional job. They will say you are irresponsible, foolish, or unrealistic. But faith is not based on human opinion. It is based on God's promise. When you commit to your calling, you are stepping into a spiritual economy where God supplies all your needs. You may not see the resources immediately, and you may not understand the timing. But if you remain faithful, provision will come in ways that defy logic. Pursuing your calling is not a rejection of work. It is a redirection of energy. God wants you to invest your time, talent, and passion into what you were created to do. This is the difference between living a life of labor and living a life of destiny. Labor is temporary, destiny is eternal. A job can consume your hours without contributing to your purpose. But when you pursue your calling, every effort, every action, every sacrifice becomes a seed that produces fruit according to God's plan. Many people fail to recognize their calling because they are too busy trying to survive. They are so consumed by the need to earn money that they never pause to ask, what did God create me to do? What unique gifts has He placed within me? God's calling is always aligned with your gifts, your passion, and your heart. When you identify it and pursue it with unwavering focus, doors will open, resources will flow, and opportunities will appear that no job could ever provide. The second principle of pursuing your calling is obedience. Calling is not about comfort, it is about alignment. You may feel fear, uncertainty, or inadequacy, but God's call does not require perfection. It requires faithfulness. The very act of stepping out in obedience activates supernatural provision. Remember the story of Joseph. He was rejected by his own family, sold into slavery, and placed in prison, yet he did not abandon God's calling on his life. He did not chase worldly recognition or secure a traditional path. He pursued God's purpose, and ultimately he rose to a position of unimaginable influence and provision. Your path may not look easy, but it will be fruitful if you stay aligned with God's calling. Many people stop short of fulfilling their destiny because they settle for employment instead of pursuing purpose. They confuse work with destiny. They think that earning money is the ultimate goal. But money is a tool, not a destination. True fulfillment comes when you are living according to the plan God has designed for you. Pursuing your calling also requires patience. Often, God allows a waiting period to prepare you for the responsibilities and blessings ahead. During this time, you may feel frustration, doubt, or pressure to conform to society's expectations. But patience in pursuit of calling is not idle waiting, it is active preparation. It is learning, growing, and aligning yourself with God's vision. Every skill you develop, every relationship you nurture, every challenge you overcome becomes part of the foundation for the fulfillment of your destiny. Do not be deceived into thinking that a job will bring the security and provision that God's calling provides. Jobs are temporary. They can be lost, replaced, or restructured. Your calling is permanent because it is rooted in divine purpose. And when you pursue your calling, God's supernatural supply accompanies it. Sometimes the provision comes through people, sometimes through resources you never expected, sometimes through doors that open miraculously. But the key is faith. You must trust that as you walk in obedience to your calling, God will meet every need. The third principle is alignment with vision. Calling is never accidental. It is intentional, crafted by God to impact the world and fulfill His plan through you. Many believers are scattered, trying to do a little of everything to survive. But God wants you to focus. He wants you to channel your energy toward what only you can do. This requires discernment, prayer, and a willingness to prioritize your calling above immediate gratification. When you focus on vision, your efforts multiply. What would take years of struggle in the natural is accomplished swiftly in the supernatural. Pursuing your calling also requires a rejection of fear. Fear is one of the greatest obstacles to destiny. Fear whispers, "You are not qualified. You do not have enough. You might fail." But faith responds, "God is sufficient. God is able. God will provide." Fear is natural. Obedience is supernatural. Every step you take in faith builds momentum, opening doors and increasing influence. Your calling is not just about provision for yourself. It is about impact. It is about using your God-given talents to bless others, to create solutions, and to leave a legacy. When you focus solely on employment, your life becomes transactional. But when you pursue your calling, your life becomes transformational. Your calling will challenge you, stretch you, and push you beyond comfort, but it will also bring fulfillment, influence, and divine supply. Many people miss the supernatural because they are distracted by the temporal. They chase salaries, positions, and status, while God is calling them to pursue purpose, which unlocks provision far greater than any paycheck. Your calling is the key that opens every door. When you walk in it, you will find opportunities, mentors, and resources that were never visible before. You will discover a network of support that God positions around you for your success. And this is the life that God desires for you, one where work is no longer about survival, but about significance, where every effort is invested in purpose, not just paychecks, where divine favor becomes the normal experience of daily living. Understand this. Pursuing your calling is an act of faith that activates God's provision. It requires courage to leave the ordinary, discernment to focus on the extraordinary, and patience to wait for the perfect timing. When you align with your calling, provision follows naturally. You do not need to chase it, it chases you. Doors that were once closed open, resources that seem scarce multiply. People who can assist you appear at the right moment. But it all begins with a decision to pursue calling over employment. Many people will advise you against this. Friends, family, and society may try to persuade you that a job is the only way to survive. But God's instructions are higher than human wisdom. He knows the plan He has for you, and if you obey Him, He will direct your steps, supply your needs, and lead you into abundance that surpasses imagination. So, when God says, "Don't look for a job," hear the deeper message: pursue your calling, trust His provision, and walk in the supernatural path He has prepared for you. Faith requires action, not hesitation. It requires focus, not distraction. It requires obedience, not compromise. The rewards are not only material, they are eternal. Your calling aligns your life with God's purposes, attracts divine favor, and ensures that every effort you make multiplies in ways beyond natural calculation. This is the life God is calling you to, a life of significance, provision, and impact. Do not settle for the temporary when the eternal is within reach. Do not chase jobs when destiny is calling. Step out in faith, embrace your calling, and watch as God provides in ways that the world cannot understand. Every seed you plant in obedience, every step you take in faith, and every sacrifice you make for your calling positions you to receive divine supply. The calling of God is a magnet for provision, influence, and favor. It is the pathway to fulfillment, abundance, and eternal significance. And so, obey the voice of God. Stop looking for a job. Pursue your calling. Trust in His provision and walk confidently into the life He has designed for you.